Suicide Squad kills the Justice League. I predict it's going to fail. But why? Let's get into it. Now, I have written some points down of why this game is actually going to fail, even though I actually liked what I played from the alpha test, or the closed alpha test, I should say. Now, these points, I feel like, it's kind of a mix of why everybody's to blame as to why this game is failing, right? Warner Brothers, especially Rocksteady, even the players, right? The people who like DC Comics and like the Suicide Squad and like the Arkham games, there's a role in why this game is failing, right? And I've written down some points. So let's go down the list of each point and I'll elaborate, right? The first point I want to get into is that this game just has poor timing. Yes. Now, obviously, everybody knows a little game called The Avengers, and that is not even 4 years old. It's going to be 4 years old in September. So a lot of people are still thinking about Avengers and how it was just an epic fail of a game, right? And I played it. I actually put at least 100 hours into it. I played on Xbox on Game Pass, and I didn't buy the game at all. I just played on Game Pass. And I played the campaign. I played a lot of the missions and the live service elements, right? The multiplayer. And I actually didn't mind it. The big problem with that game, obviously, was that they didn't support it. And also, they just didn't care to add cool characters and actually change the mission design, right? And because of those failures, Suicide Squad looks very similar to Avengers, right? It's a superhero team game based on a movie property, right? The Suicide Squad really wasn't big before the movies, right? Just like the Avengers. And so a lot of people just feel like, oh, there's a lot of similarities between this game and it couldn't come out at a worse time, right? So and I feel like that's true. It has poor timing, right? If this game released maybe back in 2018, 19, or even before Avengers, right? Which I don't think this game would have come out by then, right? It was in development since 2017, I believe. So, but either way, it's very similar to Avengers, and a lot of people just have a really bad taste from that game, right? Now, the next point I want to get into is that it's been 9 years since Rocksteady's last game. Now, Rocksteady, personally, in my opinion, they are a top tier developer, right? The Arkham trilogy, whether you like Arkham Knight or not, is still one of the best trilogies in recent memory, right? Gameplay design, the combat, the open world, the storytelling. It's almost, I would say, definitive Batman, even though it's in a video game, right? And a lot of people were expecting Rocksteady to come back hard, right? Now, a lot of people thought it would have been a Superman game. Obviously, they weren't making a Superman game ever, right? That's been debunked several times over the last several years. So, a lot of people kind of had this expectation that Rocksteady was going to do another single player action adventure game and really innovate and do something creative. And instead, we obviously get a live service game. Now, I I don't know how to feel about this, right? I mean, yes, it did take 9 years to get this game, but I mean, it still could have been a Suicide Squad multiplayer, I should say, and still be unique and interesting and play up to their strengths. And from what I played again from the alpha test, I actually do think it plays up to their strengths, right? It's just that it has a generic vibe to it that still I think is still pretty good, right? Like if they're trying to compare this to Destiny, obviously a lot of people don't like Destiny, but if you do like Destiny, you kind of might like this game, right? Like there are some elements to it that you can really see that, hey, this is not the bare minimum like Avengers or Anthem, right? But still, like a lot of people don't like these types of games and they'll never really get credit or people will never be excited for them, right? It's usually the community afterward or the community that starts to play the game and gives it a chance, they end up enjoying it, right? If you look at Fallout 76, that was a game that, people shat on for years, but it's still going. It still has new content. It's actually not that bad of a game if you're a Fallout fan. So, it's those types of fans that are going to support it. But still, I think waiting 9 years for this, it's a little disappointing, but at the same time, it's still in the Arkham universe. But I don't know. Who can we really blame there? I guess you could say Rocksteady and Warner Brothers. Maybe they had another game that was canceled. I believe it was a multiplayer game that was kind of similar to Suicide Squad, but who really knows, right? Now, the next point I want to get into is everybody's already rejected it, right? Everybody hates this game already, even before it released, right? And I'm not saying that to, shit on people, right? I mean, if you could see the gameplay and kind of judge it and get a feel if you would like it or not, right? So, I don't think that's a big deal, but the fact that there's an overwhelming amount of like criticism and just, I would say hate, right? People absolutely despise live service games, right? And turning a beloved series, especially the Arkham games, into a live service game is not a good look, right? And you could already see if you go on social media and look, a lot of people have just even minor nitpicks of the game, and they're like, "Look at this, right? Look at fucking Boomerang zipping around. It just looks stupid, right? Or why is King Shark look like that, right?" It's just minor, very minor things, and people will shit on it, right? And that just kind of reflects the fact that people just aren't liking the game no matter what aspect it is, right? And I feel like once people have already rejected a game, it's hard for it to really come back, right? It's going to be known as like, hey, a game that people just didn't care for, right? But the diehard fans or the people that get into it, they will like it, right? Now, I also think a reason why a lot of people hate this game is the premise of it, right? The fact that this is uh you're killing the Justice League and it involves guns, which a lot of characters aren't really associated with guns in the comics, right? Like King Shark having a machine gun doesn't necessarily make sense for his character, even though I would argue that the Suicide Squad are a black ops team. They're working for the government and they're sort of restricted on what they can do, right? Because they could die at any moment. Now, still, I don't think that's a really good excuse for the game, but still, I think the premise, if this was like an off-brand, if this was like The Boys, the video game, right? Maybe it might have been more received better. I don't think so. It's still a live service game, right? But just the fact that you have to kill the Justice League, right? You got to kill Superman, you got to kill Batman, and we haven't even seen the Justice League in the Arkham series. It's just a little bit weird, right? Now, the next point I want to get into is the fact that the major outlets, right? Like IGN, GameSpot, a lot of these major publications that, people do criticize, they don't like necessarily. But the fact that they aren't liking the game and that they put out negative previews, which never really happen, right? Previews are usually to advertise the game, right? And hype it up, right? Even a game like Gotham Knights, which I absolutely despise Gotham Knights. I couldn't even play it longer than 5 hours because it was just so bad. That game was still favorably previewed, right? Like if you go back and you look at GameSpot's preview for Gotham Knights, they actually thought, hey, this has some potential. It's not that bad. The combat was a little bit stiff, but it's not the Arkham game, so we should have different expectations, right? And then the reviews came out and they got bad reviews, right? They got sort of middling reviews, mediocre reviews. So the fact that IGN and these big publications are already saying that Suicide Squad is not a good game or that they're not liking it is it's not good, right? That's not a good sign because that usually means it's going to review poorly or it's not going to get the greatest reviews, right? And I already predict that this game will probably get, sevens, maybe eights just for the story, right? Um, but I think seven, it seems like from what I played, like that would actually be a fair score. Now I obviously haven't played all of the game, so who knows? Maybe the game takes a nose dive in the third act, or other missions in the game, right? Live service elements are not up to par, but still bad reviews, and most of the reviews also criticize like the boss fight, right, which was the Flash. And a lot of people are kind of memeing on several people on IGN, even though the footage that was provided in their review wasn't actually IGN playing. It was actually Rocksteady employees playing the game, and they just provided the footage, right? And they were getting whipped by the Flash boss fight, and it just shows you kind of how maybe poor the boss fight for that character is. And I know the joke is, well, it's the Flash. He's obviously has to move fast, but still, the reaction time, the poor dodge alert, which usually things like that are very annoying in games because, I mean, yeah, I do think that's kind of cheap. And from what I saw, it doesn't necessarily look like a great boss fight. Um, so we'll see about that though. But still, not a good sign at all. Now, the next point I want to get into, there's a lot of points, unfortunately, but the next point is the fake leaks. Yes, this game has been leaked to hell and back, and I've talked about the leaks on our podcast, Controller Chronicle. Yeah, this game's story has been leaked quite a few times. Obviously, the first leak was fake, right? And that sort of evolved or involved, I should say, a flashpoint sort of scenario where the Flash has to go back in time and save everybody from being corrupted by from Brainiac and things like that, right? Obviously, that was fake. Now, the newest leak, which has now been sort of debunked, here's the thing, right? It's been debunked, but also there's elements of it that are true, right? And that weren't advertised or known before, right? Such as Ivy being a child and being kind of reborn. That was never advertised in the game, and we didn't know anything about that until the leak. And then we also saw screenshots of it. And so it sort of proved the leak, right? Indirectly confirmed the leak. And now other leakers have come out and said that it's not true. And the guy who supposedly posted it said he made up some of it. So it's just a mess, right? But regardless, I think the story is going to be controversial, right? You have the Justice League being corrupted by Brainiac. The fact that people don't want to see these beloved characters die and get corrupted, or we have to kill them, even if it's for a joke or you have the option, I think that does turn off people, even though that is literally the premise of the game, right? And I also think some people are kind of cynical, like, hey, they wouldn't actually kill off the Justice League, even though that's in the title. So what they would probably do instead is they will just, have multiverse versions of them replace this version of the Justice League, right? Which I do think is a cop out, and it leans more into believability once you realize that DC is more known for their multiverse stories, right? Like having different Earths, right? Different types of Justice League, right? And who's to say? I mean, like, I don't think they're in the game, but there's that evil version of the Justice League with Ultraman and Superwoman and those types of characters, right? I don't think they'll be in the game, but that's always been an element, right? That has existed in DC Comics, right? So it kind of makes sense that they would play that up in this game, but who really knows, right? So I think the story and the leak and having to involve the multiverse premise, which is already kind of boring, is not a good sign. Now, I did have some other points, but I think they kind of already touched on what I went over, right? Sort of redundant, but I think the last point I want to leave on is the fact that I don't think people are going to give this game a chance, even though they may not like it, right? And that's fair, right? This is a full price game, it's a live service game, and I don't think anybody should give it the benefit of doubt um, if they haven't, if they looked at it and saw and they didn't like it, right? But from what I played, I like the open world, right? The open world has this sort of scale and, there's this verticalness of it, right? Where it's like you're bouncing around, jumping around. And it's probably like I think this is a big improvement on the Arkham games open world, right? Which were already great open worlds for their time, right? So the fact that this is much bigger, has a bigger scale to it, you actually feel like you're in Metropolis, right? This giant city, right? Where it's like you're gotta look up and kind of like, envision how people would see Superman in this city, right? Like it's so massive. And then you also have the traversal, which I think is really fun, just like zipping around and how each character, they all have their own different traversal. And that does change up the game quite a bit. I know some people may look at it and see like they can't really understand how the traversal changes the game, but it does, right? It makes a big difference if you play Captain Boomerang versus King Shark, right? King Shark is more jumping around, where Captain Boomerang is sort of teleporting and being really quick and fast, right? Versus Harley, who's kind of more like a Batman character, right? And then you have obviously Deadshot, who has a jetpack. So all these characters do feel different when you're moving around, right? Which I think is important, right? Because the open world is so big, and how you move around, that's obviously going to be important. Now, how does that play into mission designs? I don't know just yet, right? Um, but still, and even then, there's still good elements to the game, right? Such as like the Batman Predator encounter, right? If we have more segments like that where it's like really clever and playing up the character and the game design, then I do think this game actually has potential to be decent, right? But as of right now, I think this game is going to have a uphill battle, and that's why I think it's going to fail, right? WB Games have obviously, narrowed this game into being a live service game, because obviously you could sell skins and stuff. And overall, it just personally, I think they set this game up for failure, right? And Rocksteady is trying. I actually don't really blame Rocksteady, right? I think the game still has their flair and energy to it, even though it's a different genre and style. And it's a style that maybe most people believe that they can't do. But I think from, again, what little I've played, I think they got it better than, say, BioWare, right? Or Crystal Dynamics, who previously never worked on live service games and just didn't really understand how to make a very compelling game. And even those games, I feel like they had potential, right? Like they weren't bad. Obviously, they were bad at launch, and they obviously had massive problems. But if those problems are fixed, I could have easily kept playing Avengers, right? I could have easily kept playing Anthem, right? And that's the problem, right? Is that this game, if it doesn't do well in the first month, 6 months, then this game is pretty much dead, right? And that's the problem with live service games. It's the fact that these studios, these publishers are not willing to commit to the live service element. For once the game does not take off and it's not Fortnite or Call of Duty, they're willing to drop it. And that's a massive problem, right? So we'll see if this game does well, then I don't actually mind. I'm not like this massive hater of it, but I'm concerned about the story. I'm concerned about other elements, even though there's elements I like. Yeah, so that's going to end the video. Bit of a more lengthy video today, just because I obviously was reading off of points, and I had a lot to say. I still feel like I could have said more, but regardless, I'm going to end the video and see you in the next one. Peace.